Hello students, how are you? I hope you are doing fine. This is Teacher Hilda, your literature teacher, that is Senior 6. Before we start, I want you to get ready with your notebooks and pens and prepare your minds, by the way, because what we are going to look at is something that we are not going to write much, but I'm going to request you to get out the key points and note them down. Now, before we start, I want to first remind you that this program is brought to you by the Rwanda Education Board in partnership with MASTERCARD Foundation and Inspire, Educate and Empower Rwanda. So in our previous lesson, we looked at the European literary traditions, and we looked at a number of them. We looked at what they are and the examples, the classical, the postmodern, the modernism, the romanticism, among others. And like I promised, that today we are going to look at romantic literature, or what you can call romanticism. Now, is there anyone, when someone tells you romantic literature, what comes into your mind? Is it something like we are going to talk about romance, or we are going to see people romancing? What comes into your mind when someone talks about romantic literature? So, romantic literature, I'm going to use the word romanticism because I think it is more easier for me. Now, romanticism is a movement in arts and literature which originated in the late 18th century. Now, it has emphasized an inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual. So, it was derived from the Roman in various European languages such as romance. So, by means of the middle of the 18th century, two words, romantic in English and romantique in French, were both in universal use as adjectives of praise for natural phenomena such as views and sunsets, in sense to close to modern English usage, but without the connotations. Now, Romanticism was an artistic and intellectual movement which took place in Europe between the late 18th century and the mid-19th century. So, understood broadly as a break from the guiding principles of Enlightenment. Now, Enlightenment had its own values. Enlightenment, for it believed in reason, that we have to reason about something. It believed in human nature. It believed in man over nature, and it believed in forward-looking, meaning progress. Let's say we make something. How are we going to better it? How is it going to be so better than what we have today? So they looked at everything in form of progress. So Romanticism was against the principles of Enlightenment, now which established reasons as the foundation of all knowledge. Now, the Romantic movement emphasized the importance of emotional sensitivity and individual subjectivity. Now, for the Romantics, imagination rather than reason was the most important creative faculty. Now, why was it all about imagination and rather than reason? Now, remember, the principles of Enlightenment focused on reason, why something happens the way it happens. Why do we breathe like this? Why is it that man behaves like this? But for Romanticism, it only focuses on passion and emotion. How does someone feel about something? Okay? The passion, if you look at the sunset, how do you feel? What emotions do you feel? Okay? So the most Romanticism was really against reason. For it believed in emotion and individual subjectivity. If you feel something like this, they want you to feel something, okay? That it is so important to feel like this, but they don't reason as to why you should feel like that.
Come along and play with us.
Now, when we talk about Romanticism in literature, now, Romanticism in English literature started in the late 18th century. So with the poets like William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor, it continued into the 19th century with a second generation romantic poets. So most notably Shelley and John Keats and Lord Byron. Now, In contrast to the reasoned detachment of the Enlightenment, the poetic works of Blake and Wordsworth were characterized by their emotional sensitivity and reverence for nature. Now remember, romantic literature focuses on someone's imaginations, the emotions. They don't focus on reason. So that is why these poets, their works were characterized by emotional sensitivity and relevance. So though the second generation of romantic poets, especially Byron and Shelley, became notorious for their subversive works, later romantic poets also retained many characteristics established by Blake and Wordsworth. So much like the poets of Wordsworth took inspiration from nature, and Byron's poetry had a strong introspective character. Now, all these poets, what they focused on was nature. Now, the guiding principles of Romanticism are nature, right? They believe there is nature, there is childhood, there is emotion, and then there is religion. Now, when we talk about romantic literature in English, when we look at the works of Wordsworth, when we look at the works of Blake and other writers, we shall see that most of their work are characterized by emotional sensitivity and reverence for nature. So Shelley, Byron, and Keats also acquired reputation as romantic. Why? Because many aspects of their lives, that is including their travel around Europe and the fact that they died young, conformed to the emerging 19th century ideal type of a romantic hero. So when we talk about romanticism in art, okay? Now in art, when we look at art, we only don't look at the pictures. Yeah. So nature was also source of inspiration in the visual arts of the romantic movement. Why? You see, the romantics believe that it is better to have a tree than to have an industry. All right? So, breaking with a longer tradition of historical and allegorical paintings, which took scenes from history of the Bible as their principal subject matter, many artists like J.M.W. Turner and John Constable, as well as printmakers and engravers like Samuel Palmer and Thomas, chose instead to depict the natural world, most notably landscape and maritime scenes. So romantic artists depicted nature not only beautiful but also powerful, unpredictable and destructive. So this constitutes a radical departure from Enlightenment representation of nature or of the natural world as orderly. Now, the Enlightenment believes that nature is like that because of progress, that today you're going to grow a tree and it is going to, at a certain point, you're going to cut it down. But the Romantics believe that it has to be there. Its beauty should be appreciated, should be, should be just treasured and left it at that. That is why romantic artists depicted nature to be not only beautiful but also powerful. So unpredictable. You cannot predict nature, but it does what? It happens. So to the Romantics, nature is beautiful and powerful and unpredictable. When we talk about Romanticism in music, now, the Romantic movement in music originated in Beethoven, whose later works drew and developed the classical styles of Mozart. So Beethoven's later symphonies and pianos were made distinctive by their expressive and strong emotion quality. Now, these characteristics set tone for successive generation of romantic composers in Europe, including Franz, Robert, and Felix. Now, romantic music was also highly innovative and technically adventurous. While Franz audiences in the great concert halls of Europe with his mastery performance and never-before-seen techniques, Polish, born expressive and emotional complex piano pieces. Now, Romantic period was also a golden age of opera Europe, with composers such as Verdi and Richard combining music relics and visual imagery to construct dramatic narratives which continue to captivate audiences today. Now, when we talk about romanticism in music, now we are looking at the beauty. Someone sings about the beauty of nature. Someone sings about the beauty of anything. Now, remember, when it comes to romanticism, we are focusing on nature, the beauty, the subjectivity, the unpredictable, the most powerful, okay? Now, When we talk about romanticism in music, we look at the style, what they sing about, what impact, what emotions do you feel when you listen to that music. Now, when we talk about romanticism as a mindset, because it can be a mindset, a romanticism may be best understood as a movement. The artists, the poets and musicians of the Romantic period were united by their determination to use art to convey emotion or provoke an emotional response for audience. So when you listen to something, there is always something that you have to feel. Now, it is a mindset that when you listen to something, or it is the artist's mindset that he is going to play a piece and there is a way it is going to affect you, whether positive or negative. So there are also something pioneering, almost revolutionary about romanticism. It involved breaking with the past and consciously moving away from ideas and traditions of enlightenment. So in so doing, romanticism fundamentally changed the prevailing attitudes towards nature, emotion, reason, and even the individual. Why? Because they are trying to run away from the values of enlightenment. Okay? So romanticism, we can say that romanticism was a literary movement. We all know that, okay, we have learned that it began in the 18th century, ending in the middle 19th century. Although its influence continues up to today, marked by a focus on individual. Now, like the unique perspective of an individual, like often guided by irrational emotional impulses, a respect for nature and the primitive, and celebration of the common man. Romanticism can be seen as a reaction to a huge change in society that occurred during this period, so including the revolutions that burned through countries like France and the United States, ushering in grand experiments in democracy. So that is what we can talk about romanticism.
Come along and play with us.
Romanticism has different characteristics. Romantic literature is marked by 6 primary characteristics. The first one is celebration of nature. The other one is focus on individual and spirituality. The other one is celebration of isolation and melancholy. And then interest in the common man. Then the second last one is idealization of women and personification and pathetic fallacy. Now, when we talk about celebration of nature, the focus on individual and spirituality. So romantic writers turned inward, valuing the individual experience above all else. So this in turn led to heightened sense of spirituality in romantic work and all the addiction of occult and supernatural elements. So the works of Edgar Allan exemplifies this aspect as a movement. For example, The Raven tells the story of a man grieving for his dead love, an idealized woman in the romantic tradition. So when a seemingly sentient raven arrives and torments him, which can be interpreted literally as seen as manifestation of his mental instability. We also have celebration of isolation and melancholy. Now, Ralph Waldo Emerson was a very influential writer in Romanticism. His books of essays explored many of these themes of the literary movement and codified themes. So his 1841 essay, Self-Reliance, is a seminal work of romantic writing in which he exalts the value of looking inward and determining your own path and relying on your own resources. Now, related to the instance of isolation, melancholy is a key feature for many works of romanticism, usually seen as a reaction to inevitable failure. So writers wish to express the pure beauty they perceived, and failure to do so adequately resulted into despair. When we talk about celebration of isolation and melancholy, the writers here believe that it has to be upon you. You have to look into your inward self, determine your own path, and rely only on yourself. Like you have to rely on only yourself. Now, the other characteristic is idealization of women. Now, in works such as Pose the Raven, women were always presented as idealized love interests, pure and beautiful. Like they were so beautiful, but usually without anything else to offer, that the women did not have like anything else to offer apart from their beauty and their love. So ironically, the most notable novels of this period were written by women. For example, Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte and Mary. But they had to be initially published under male pseudonyms. Why? Because of these attitudes. So much romantic literature is infused with the concept of women being perfect, innocent beings, okay? To be adored, mourned, and respected, but never touched or relied upon, okay? So that is how a woman was seen, that she is beautiful and pure, and that is the only thing she can offer. And they were supposed to be adored and respected, but they believe that you cannot rely on a woman. So our last characteristic of romanticism is personification and pathetic fallacy. Now, romantic literature's fixation on nature is characterized by the heavy use of both personification and pathetic fallacy. Now, romantic literature's fixation on nature is characterized by the use of both personification and pathetic fallacy. Okay? So, those are some of the characteristics of romanticism. Now, romanticism continues to influence literature today. And for example, look at Twilight, the novel Twilight. They are clear descendants of the movement, incorporating most of the characteristics of classic romanticism, despite being published a century and a half after the end of the movement's active life, after the end of romanticism.
Come along and play with us.
So I want us to summarize what we have looked at in romanticism. Now, we have said that romanticism began in the 18th century, and it focused, in general, romanticism thinkers and artists emphasized inner feelings, emotions, and imaginations. So they focus on the mysterious and the supernatural. They also on the odd, exotic, and grotesque, horrifying. So they loved the beauties of untamed nature, idealized the past as a simpler and noble time. So they cherished folk traditions, music, and stories. They valued common people and the individual. So they also promoted radical change and democracy. However, not all romantic authors gave change to emphasis to these features. Okay? Yeah, so they really did not. Now, in conclusion, therefore, in romanticism, it is always right to follow your heart. To be romantic is to have sympathy for madness and to hold an utmost vengeful attitude towards bombastic claims. So Wordsworth focused on natural world. He would write about butterflies, daffodils, and he hated anything mechanic and industrial. So to him, to be romantic is to take the side of nature. He would prefer a lake instead of a train. In other words, he preferred nature. So some romantics also think that civilization is what has made us sick. Now, has it really made us sick? Okay? So the romantic movement has totally changed our sensibility as the world is growing more technological. Romanticism has come out to stick out for the irrational. So we have to understand romanticism as a reaction. Now, I want us to look at Newton's third law of motion. It says that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So romantic movement is a reaction against industrial revolution, against the Enlightenment. The romantics weren't in line with the Enlightenment values. So the values of romantics are, one, nature, that nature is most powerful, it is beautiful, and it is most important. They also looked at childhood, the joys of being a child. Now, in the past, they would just look at a child. This child is going to grow up and become a man and start living their own life. But romanticism views children not as just children, but childhood as the age of innocence, enjoyment, among other things. Romanticism also focuses on emotion and religion. Like I said, Enlightenment used to focus on reason, human nature, a man over nature, and forward, like progressing. However, Romanticism focused on passion or emotion, nature over man, And they were focused on backward looking, thinking about what we have, thinking about what we have lost. Now, many of you have genes, okay? But you have multiple pairs of genes. And look at the life of people before the Industrial Revolution. Did they have much of those? So romantics are trying to say that all these have come at a price. Look at what we have lost. Look at the nature we have lost. Look at the lakes that are no longer good. Look at, we used to have beauty. Nature used to be beautiful. But now because of Industrial Revolution, pollution, among other things, they think we have lost what? We have lost most of the things. So that is it all about romanticism. I think you have got something about romanticism. And I want to thank you for paying attention. Thanks for being good students. And I want you to keep safe, by the way, because I miss you. I want to see you back at school. So keep safe until we meet again in our next lesson. In our next lesson, we are going to look at realism. So you can read about it so that in our next lesson, we can just focus on it. So keep safe until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time. Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time.